Hi, everyone, this is the Encyclopedia channel. The book interpreted for you in this program is Forgetting, the Benefits of Not Remembering, which talks about the memory and forgetting mechanism of the brain. The good memory function allows us to easily recall knowledge points in the exam, accurately remember every book and every movie we have read, and it can also make us chat with friends endlessly and full of conversation. In contrast, forgetting is often regarded as a bad thing, and the feeling of trying to remember but not being able to remember is definitely not good. So, the brain is how the brain remembers, and how does it forget? What does forgetting mean to us, and what are the consequences of forgetting abnormalities? After listening to this episode, you will understand. For a long time, the academic community has also believed that forgetting means that our memory system has malfunctioned, so scientists have long focused on memory, including studying how the brain forms, stores and retrieves memories, and how memory fragments, how is it extracted, processed, and recorded. As for the formation mechanism of forgetting, it is often ignored by people. But is forgetting really just a manifestation of memory decline? After reading this book, you will find that, on the contrary, forgetting not only does not mean memory decline, but is also a function of the brain, even a talent. It is with the help of forgetting that we can understand the world flexibly and effectively, constantly adapt to changing environments, and maintain vigorous creativity. If we cannot forget, we will experience memory overload, obsessed with infinite details and past emotions. If we forget too quickly, we may be plagued by disease and lose the ability to live a normal life. Only when remembering and forgetting are in balance, our brains can maintain normal work and life. The author of this book, Scott Small, is an expert in the field of memory. He is a professor of neurology and psychiatry at Columbia University in the United States, and the director of the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. He has long studied the mechanisms of aging and dementia. As of the publication of this book, Small has published more than 140 research reports on memory function and impairment. There are actually quite a few books about memory, many of which focus on sharing methods and techniques to improve memory, but reading such books alone cannot alleviate our skill anxiety. We still worry that our ability cannot keep up with the requirements of work and cause anxiety, because we still cannot correctly understand forgetting. And this book tells us the rationality and necessity of forgetting, which allows us to accept our imperfections and realize the great potential we have, which is very important. Next, we will introduce the content of the book to you in two parts. First of all, let's talk about how the brain remembers and how it forgets. The second part goes on to discuss, what does forgetting mean to us, and what are the consequences of forgetting abnormalities? First part. How does the brain remember and forget? The brain is a sophisticated organ. Although it is composed of neurons as a whole, different parts have different functions. For example, memory mainly involves three parts of the brain. The first is a series of areas at the back of the brain, we call it the back area for short. The second is the hippocampus, or the hippocampus for short, which is a structure hidden deep in the temporal lobe cortex of the brain, named for its shape resembling a seahorse. The third part is an area of the prefrontal cortex of the brain, referred to as the prefrontal area. How is memory formed with the cooperation of these three parts? In order to facilitate understanding, we can compare the brain to a computer, so that we can visualize the way the brain stores and retrieves memories. The back of the brain is like a computer's hard drive, where our memories are stored. The basic unit of computer storage information is called bit or bit, and the human brain also has a basic unit of memory storage, that is, our brain cells, also called neurons. If you look at a neuron, its structure is mainly divided into two parts, the cell body itself, and the branch-like structures extending from the cell body like branches. At the top of these branches are hundreds of tiny protrusions called spines, which connect neurons to each other. Dendritic spines are insignificant in size, but extremely important in function because our memories are essentially stored in the form of dendritic spines. Dendritic spines can grow as well as dissolve. When adjacent neurons are simultaneously stimulated sufficiently, the spines connecting them grow, and when enough spines grow, the connections between neurons are strengthened, and new memories are formed and become stronger. Conversely, when adjacent neurons are stimulated asynchronously, dendritic spines may gradually dissolve and become smaller, and we will forget. Of course, in the actual scene, memory and forgetting cannot be driven by a few neurons. it will involve millions of neurons at every turn, because the brain must follow a hub-and-spoke reconstruction when forming memories process. It is difficult to understand the theory alone, so let us use the example of face name binding to talk about the specific way of memory formation. When we meet a new friend, we will first remember his appearance and name, and connect these two kinds of information, so that we can greet each other smoothly the next time we meet. This process sounds simple, but it can actually be refined into many specific steps. First of all, although a face looks like a whole, if the brain wants to remember the appearance of this face, it must first decompose the facial features, such as the color of the eyes and the shape of the mouth, and then record these visual elements separately. Then, the visual center in the brain, which is responsible for processing visual information, will start with basic visual elements such as color and shape, and start to reconstruct the facial features of the individual, and finally form the face in our memory. Similarly, when we hear the name of a new friend for the first time, the auditory centers form memory of the name in this way. All kinds of centers for processing information, including the visual and auditory centers, are gathered in the back of the brain, so this is where our memories are concentrated. But when we form memories, it is not enough to have the participation of the back of the brain. Although our memories are all stored here, in order to make connections between these memory elements, the brain needs the cooperation of another area. This area, it is a seahorse. Still take the memory of faces and names as an example. If we want to connect visual information and auditory information, the neurons of the two hubs must establish a connection in the form of dendritic spines, but this connection is not easy to form. Dendritic spines will proliferate when stimulated, but this proliferation not only consumes a lot of energy, but is also very fragile and unstable. If there is no continuous stimulation, dendritic spines will quickly dissipate even if they proliferate. Like a primary school student who can't concentrate, it's easy to get distracted in class. That's when the hippocampus comes into play. The hippocampus is like a strict teacher, helping new dendritic spines overcome restlessness and mature quickly and stably within a few weeks. You can also think of the hippocampus as the save button in the computer. After we edit the content, only by clicking save will the information not be lost, otherwise there will be nothing after turning off the computer. Once the spines of the central hub have been educated and conscious memories are formed in the posterior regions, the hippocampus mission is complete, and the hippocampus is then released from its teaching duties to train the next batch of spines. The hippocampus is extremely important. Whether it functions normally or not is directly related to our ability to form memories. For example, why do babies have no memory? The reason is that the hippocampus is not fully functional until we are about 3 years old, and even if we form memories before then, we cannot retain them. In the same way, when we enter old age, the function of the hippocampus gradually declines with aging, and the ability to remember new things will also decline. If the hippocampus is the computer's save button, the prefrontal region is like the computer's open button, helping us quickly retrieve existing memories. Just like when we walk into a memory library, although we can slowly find the book we want, but with the assistance of the librarian, the speed of finding the book will be much faster. To summarize, the physiological basis of memory is the creation of dendritic spine connections between neurons in the brain. These memories are stored in the posterior regions of the brain, strengthened by training in the hippocampus, and retrieved through the prefrontal region when used. This is how we form memories, so how do we forget? Some friends may think that this is not simple. Memorizing is like going forward, and forgetting is like going backward. The physiological mechanism used is the same, but the direction is different. However, this is really not the case. Forgetting and memory use two completely different physiological mechanisms. The scientists found that neurons use a series of specific molecules to promote the growth of dendritic spines. These molecules can be regarded as the brain's memory toolbox. At the same time, neurons use other molecules to promote the breakdown of dendritic spines. These molecules can be seen as a forgetting toolbox. Under the action of the forgetting toolbox, the dendritic spines connecting different neurons will gradually shrink or even be completely decomposed, and forgetting occurs in this way. The physiological mechanism of forgetting sounds uncomplicated, but its significance is very important. The memory toolbox and the forgetting toolbox are independent of each other, one dedicated to remembering and the other to forgetting. Therefore, forgetting is not caused by memory decline. Normal forgetting is actually the active function and important needs of the brain. How important is this need? It's been theorized that the sleep we spend a third of our lives in is probably for forgetting. Why do we sleep? This question is one of the great mysteries of the field of physiology. It takes only a short time each day to consume the food and water necessary for life, but much longer time to sleep. During sleep, we are unprotected from the surrounding environment and actually make ourselves in danger. And not only humans, but all animals with complex nervous systems need sleep. Mammals, fish, birds, and even lower insects have to sleep every day. But why? British biologist Francis Crick won the Nobel Prize for discovering the double helix structure of DNA, but he did not choose to stay in the field of genes, but devoted the latter part of his research career to brain science-related research. In the 1980s, Crick boldly imagined in his published papers that we dream in order to forget. Why did he say that? This is because the physiological basis of the brain determines that the brain must often forget in order to continue to work normally. There are tens of billions of neurons in the cerebral cortex, and each neuron has thousands of dendritic spines. In this way, the number of dendritic spines in the brain is an astronomical number. Neurons will respond according to the events we experience every day. Continuously adjust the growth of dendritic spines. For example, if you are awake for 16 hours on a certain day, countless pictures and sounds will flash in front of your eyes and ears. The memory of each moment is the result of the growth of millions of dendritic spines scattered in the brain. But the problem is that the growth space of dendritic spines is limited and cannot continue indefinitely. When the brain's memory storage area is full of overgrown dendritic spines, people's perception of the outside world will be affected, and the dendritic spines may even become confused due to carrying excessive information, making the senses that were normally functioning processing has failed. Crick believed that this problem could be solved by sleep, and his students and other researchers have since revised and refined this idea. Every morning when we wake up, we will find that we can't remember many things from the previous day, which means that sleep brings forgetting. During this time, sleep acts like a gardener, spending hours cleaning and renewing the cerebral cortex to make room for future memories to be stored. During sleep, especially dreaming, the hippocampus stimulates and replays key memories stored in the brain to stabilize these memory fragments. As for most other ordinary memories, their dendritic spines will be broken down under the action of the forgetting toolbox. This hypothesis has been supported by strong experimental evidence in recent years. In 2017, researchers used a new microscope to observe that sleep does indeed lead to massive shrinkage of dendritic spines. A student at the Crick once said that sleep is the price we pay for the nervous system's thirst for perception, which has evolved exceptionally sensitive dendritic spines. We sleep so long because the molecular machinery of the forgetting toolbox is so complex that it takes hours to complete the breakdown of dendritic spines. The second part. We just talked about the physiological mechanism of brain memory and forgetting. At this time, some people will definitely be curious. Having said so much, we all know that memory is very important, but what is the use of forgetting? Next, let us talk about it in detail. What does forgetting mean to us, and what are the consequences of forgetting abnormalities? We who have the normal ability to forget may find it difficult to imagine what a world that cannot be forgotten would look like. However, scientists have discovered that most of the core molecules in the two toolboxes for controlling memory and forgetting in humans and animals are the same, so people can simulate the changes in human memory and forgetting by controlling these two sets of molecular tools in animals. The situation that arises. For example, when the experimental animals are asked to find the exit of the maze, the stronger the memory of the experimental individual, the faster they can remember the escape route of the complex maze, which is easy to understand. But if the maze is slightly changed after the animal has memorized the route, those individuals with normal forgetting ability can find the alternative route faster, and those individuals with strong memory but whose forgetting ability is turned off can find the alternative route. The speed of the route is much slower. This is because modifying previous memories is more effective than forming entirely new memories from scratch when learning alternative routes, and the speed of modifying previous memories depends largely on the strength of the forgetting ability. Through animal experiments, we can conclude that forgetting is of great significance to the flexibility of behavior. This conclusion is not only applicable to animals, but it can also be found in humans. Autistic patients in the crowd provide a window for us to observe the meaning of forgetting. Autism, also known as autism, is a disease caused by brain development disorders. Autistic patients often behave abnormally in daily behavior, and some patients have extraordinary memory. However, this kind of memory lacks the ability of comprehensive association, which is a kind of mechanical memory. For example, some autistic patients can memorize a long series of numbers after only one listening. This ability sounds very good and powerful, but it is not useful in daily life. Limited, because our memory flexibility requirements tend to be higher. For example, if you woke up at 8 o'clock yesterday and woke up at 8:10 today, and the wake-up time has changed, you need to flexibly adjust your travel strategy to ensure that you are not late for work. Most people have this kind of behavioral flexibility, but for some autistic patients, they have a mechanical memory that exceeds that of ordinary people, but they cannot forget normally the way they imagined it. The behavior of all autistic individuals is rigid and stereotyped, so having repetitive and restrictive behaviors is a necessary clinical feature for diagnosing autism. Studies have found that autism is closely related to human genetics, and the proteins expressed by almost all genes related to autism will affect the dendritic spines of neurons, and they will jointly resist the function of the forgetting toolbox and make loneliness. People with this disorder lose the ability to normally forget. Therefore, the inability to forget normally is the fundamental reason for the abnormal behavior and rigidity of autistic patients. The significance of forgetting to behavioral flexibility can also be confirmed in the computer field. Just imagine, it is not difficult for you to recognize the same person from a bunch of photos. Although the visual information of each photo is different, different lighting can change the color of the face, different angles can change the shape of the face, different hairstyles, headgear, glasses, makeup can change a person's facial features, but your brain can still easily recognize the same person in different photos. But it is not easy for computers to do this. Although it can record every detail of the human face in detail, down to every wrinkle at the corner of the eye and every beard on the upper lip, this is actually a mechanical memory similar to that of autistic patients. If the computer is really allowed to use this mechanical memory to perform face recognition, it will be regarded as the same person, and it will be judged as two people before and after shaving. This ability to dwell on details rather than generalize flexibly is a common problem when computers recognize photos. By testing different computer algorithms, the scientists found that adding more memory equated to adding more dendritic spines, and did not improve the accuracy of face recognition. Conversely, if the algorithm is forced to properly forget and ignore certain details, such as whether a person is shaved or not, the success rate of face recognition can be significantly improved. You see, the importance of forgetting to behavioral flexibility can be demonstrated whether it is animals or humans, organisms or machines. In addition, another important role of forgetting is to maintain people's emotional health. In our brain, the amygdala is responsible for processing and encoding emotional information. It is connected to the hippocampus. Through the training of the hippocampus, it can add emotional color to our memory, especially negative emotions such as unhappiness, fear, anger, and pain. For example, if you hate Zhang San very much, then your memory of Zhang San will be under the action of the amygdala, adding a feeling of disgust. The next time you see Zhang San, your amygdala will be particularly active, reminding you of this people are annoying. Under normal circumstances, the amygdala is not always active, and the emotional information it generates is gradually forgotten over time. This mechanism can reduce the risk of mental dysfunction, and it can also save us from pain, depression, and resentment. Liberated from the prison. However, if under external stimuli, the amygdala is in a state of high sensitivity and overreaction for a long time, people may suffer from psychological diseases such as post-traumatic stress disorder. This is because the dendritic spines of amygdala neurons will also adjust their growth state with the stimulation of the external environment. The larger and denser their dendritic spines, the more sensitive the neurons are to incoming stimuli. If a person is in a state of high-intensity stimulation for a long time, his amygdala will experience pathological growth of dendritic spines and become more sensitive to external stimuli after growth. This two-way feedback will eventually make the amygdala permanently enter a pathological state, making people extremely sensitive to external stimuli. Therefore, many soldiers who have experienced wars are prone to post-traumatic stress disorder after retiring, because the mental stimulation brought to them by the battlefield is too great. From this perspective, forgetting is also of great significance to our mentality and emotional health. Forgetting is very important. We must forget it, but in real life, it is rare that we cannot forget it. On the contrary, it is more common that memory becomes worse and forgetting too quickly, especially among the elderly. The balance between memories is often upset, and the cause often lies in the hippocampus. The authors point out that there are two possible causes of hippocampal function decline in older adults: normal aging or Alzheimer's disease. As the body ages, the function of the hippocampus weakens due to normal wear and tear, which is similar to presbyopia in the brain and is not a disease. Alzheimer's disease, by contrast, is a disease that severely affects brain function. Alzheimer's disease has multiple stages. In the preclinical stage, specific neurons in the hippocampus will malfunction. Some patients find that they occasionally forget newly received information, such as the name of the person they met recently. The disease at this stage is not serious. After many years, Alzheimer's disease will enter the prodromal stage. At this time, although the affected area of the disease is still the hippocampus, it has begun to completely destroy neurons and cause obvious memory impairment. For example, patients will forget the movie they just watched last night. Then, usually after 5 to 10 years, the patient will enter the dementia stage. At this time, Alzheimer's disease will spread upward from the hippocampus and affect the cerebral cortex, such as the area in the back of the brain where memory is stored. At this time, the patient will show obvious pathology. Forgetting, such as forgetting what happened when you were young, language, action routes, or even the way home. Eventually, Alzheimer's disease will extend to the entire cerebral cortex, depriving the patient of individuality and personality, and then destroying the brainstem that maintains basic human functions such as consciousness, sleep, breathing, and eating. This is the final stage of Alzheimer's disease. We need forgetting, but what we need is forgetting balanced with memory. Alzheimer's disease is a catastrophe for anyone, so what can we do about it? Yuhan, a popular science writer, introduced the past and present of Alzheimer's disease in detail in the book The Thief Who Stole the Mind, but regrettably gave the answer. So far, people have no effective prevention and treatment of Alzheimer's disease. Methods and related medical methods are still being explored. However, existing evidence suggests that eating more vegetables and fruits, doing regular aerobic exercise, improving social interaction, thinking more and reading more may reduce the risk of disease and even reduce the symptoms of disease. Now, let's briefly summarize. First of all, we talked about how the brain remembers and how it forgets. There are three main parts of the brain involved in memory function: the posterior region, which stores memories, the hippocampus, which helps form new memories, and the prefrontal cortex, which helps retrieve memories. The interconnected dendritic spines between neurons are the physiological basis of memory. The brain uses different molecular mechanisms to grow or dissolve dendritic spines when remembering and forgetting. Forgetting is not a manifestation of memory decline, but an independent function of the brain. We spend several hours a day sleeping, which is probably the price the brain has to pay for normal forgetting. Then we discussed what forgetting means to us, and what are the consequences of forgetting abnormalities. Both animal experiments and the manifestations of human autism have proved that we need to forget to ensure the flexibility of behavior, and the mechanical memory that cannot be associated and flexible has very limited help in our daily life. Forgetting can also release us from the cage of negative emotions, so that the amygdala will not be in a state of high tension all the time, which helps to maintain people's mental health. We need to forget, but we need a balance between memory and forgetting. The pathological amnesia caused by Alzheimer's disease requires our vigilance. We mainly shared the physiological mechanism of memory and forgetting, and discussed the importance of forgetting, but the fact that the brain needs to forget does not mean that we have to have poor memory. In fact, as long as memory and forgetting reach a relatively balanced state, the normal function of the brain will not be affected. On this basis, it is of course a good thing to have a good memory. So finally, let's share ideas for improving memory through two other books that introduce memory. German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus proposed the very famous Ebbinghaus memory method in the book Psychology of Memory. He pointed out that the forgetting speed of memory is irregular. Phases are the fastest to forget, and as time goes on, the rate of forgetting will gradually slow down until it stops. Therefore, after learning, if we can review before the forgotten point appears, for example, after the first memory, 3 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours, 3 days, 5 days, and 10 days, we will be able to firmly remember the relevant knowledge. Turning memory into long-term memory. Japanese brain science expert Yuji Ekitani pointed out in his Examination Brain Science that when we want to remember knowledge in a certain field, we should not plunge into those specific details all at once. A more effective method is step-by-step. To advance, start with the overall situation, understand the partitions and subcategories of the global system, and then enter each subcategory, and refine it down a little bit. For example, a person who has just started to learn Western painting may feel that the styles are similar when seeing oil paintings. At this time, he needs to understand the overall knowledge of oil paintings, and then learn different genres and styles, and then refine the details of oil paintings such as themes, strokes, and composition. Only in this way can we fully and effectively remember the relevant knowledge of oil painting. There are many learning and memory skills, you can master them very well, and there is no problem if you can't master them. When you find yourself forgetting some knowledge points, you don't have to blame yourself at all, because forgetting is actually a talent of your brain. With our help, we can greet each day with ease and enthusiasm. This is the end of this episode of the show. What do you think about it differently? Welcome to leave a message to discuss with everyone. Hey, if you like our channel, please subscribe us. Haha, remember to like it.